Vikings, let's win this game.
Attention Vikings fans. The rumor mill is heating up behind the scenes in Minnesota about a major signing that could be on the horizon for the team. And the front office needs to move quickly on this decision because another name might be disappearing from the equation. Right in the middle of all that, a hidden gem from the draft has emerged who could mathematically fit this defense like a glove. And that is not all. There is also a delicate situation involving the possible departure of an important pass rusher from the roster. And the last one, a defensive lineman is expected to receive an exclusive contract tender from the Vikings. There is a conversation starting to gain real traction around the league that could directly impact the Vikings quarterback plan. This is not a small rumor. It is the kind of situation that makes a front office pause, look at the entire board, and think twice before locking in a final direction. Because the truth is simple. The team still believes in the development of the young quarterback they are grooming in-house, but at the same time the market might be opening an unexpected door. And whenever a legendary veteran suddenly becomes available, there is always that temptation to take a closer look. That is when a familiar name started floating back into Minnesota's orbit. Aaron Rodgers. Yes, that Aaron Rodgers. The four-time most valuable player still has not decided what he wants to do with his future. After the Steelers were eliminated from the playoffs, he basically disappeared from the competitive spotlight for a while. He has been enjoying the offseason with his wife, living quietly, watching shows at home and staying far away from any rushed decision. But his situation is interesting. So far, there has been no formal offer from Pittsburgh for him to return. No concrete proposal, nothing forcing Rodgers to make a decision right away. In other words, he is officially a free agent, and that changes a lot. Behind the scenes in the National Football League, there are already people suggesting Minnesota could take another look at that possibility. Last year, the team actually held conversations with Rodgers before committing to their draft plan and selecting J.J. McCarthy. The difference now is that the situation could look very different. If the coaching staff still believes McCarthy needs more time to develop, bringing in Rodgers for one season would make a lot of sense. It would essentially be a one-year bridge. The young quarterback learns from one of the greatest players to ever do it while the team stays competitive. Now imagine that scenario inside the Vikings offense. Justin Jefferson running routes, Jordan Addison stretching the field, T.J. Hawkinson dominating the middle, and Aaron Rodgers commanding the huddle. Just picturing it gives you chills. Of course, nothing in the National Football League is ever that simple. There are other quarterbacks available on the market. One of them could be released soon and become a very affordable option. Other veterans could also appear depending on how free agency unfolds. So Minnesota cannot wait forever. If there is real interest, the front office will probably want a quick answer from Rodgers, because if he takes too long to decide, the team could miss out on other important options. There is also another interesting detail in this story. Rodgers recently made it clear that he still feels a strong connection with several people inside the Steelers organization. That includes leadership tied to a coach who played a major role in his career years ago in Green Bay. Does that mean Pittsburgh is still the favorite? Maybe, but things change fast in the National Football League. One phone call, one convincing vision, one offense ready to compete, and everything can flip. Now I want to hear from you. If that door actually opens, would you accept Aaron Rodgers in Minnesota for 1 year while J.J. McCarthy continues to develop? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because the next story completely shifts the tone of this quarterback conversation. A quick message from one fan to another. Subscribe to the channel. It is completely free, and it helps strengthen this community a lot. Now let's keep going. For several weeks this offseason, a curious theory started circulating among fans and parts of the National Football League media. The idea was simple. A veteran quarterback could come out of retirement if the perfect opportunity appeared. A competitive team. A roster ready to win. A place where chasing a Super Bowl still felt realistic. Naturally, many people started looking toward Minnesota, because when you see an offense loaded with talent, a respected offensive coaching staff, and a team still trying to settle its quarterback situation, certain puzzle pieces begin to fit in people's minds. But as the days passed, that story started cooling off inside the league itself. Executives and general managers began sending clear signals that the idea might never have been as real as it sounded. All that excitement showing up in podcasts, debates, and social media simply is not reflected inside the decision-making rooms of the National Football League. That is where the name at the center of the theory comes in. Derek Carr, the former Raiders and Saints quarterback, recently mentioned in a podcast that he could consider returning to the National Football League if the right championship opportunity appeared. That was enough for many fans and analysts to start imagining scenarios. The Vikings quickly became part of that conversation. But when reporters began talking directly with league executives, the response was almost always the same: cold skepticism. Some insiders revealed that inside front offices, the interest in a Carr comeback is extremely limited. One agent representing a top free agent quarterback even said he does not view Carr as competition in the market. An anonymous general manager went even further. According to him, the media is talking far more about this possibility than actual teams are. There is also another complicated detail in this situation. Carr is still under contract with the New Orleans Saints. That means any team interested would have to negotiate a trade and also absorb a contract considered heavy for a player who did not even play last season. That turns the whole process into a complicated operation. And when teams start analyzing all those variables, the excitement fades quickly. Looking strictly at his career numbers, Carr has always been a productive quarterback. Seasons with more than 4,000 passing yards, solid touchdown totals, a steady playing style that reminds many people of the type of football Kirk Cousins delivered in Minnesota for years. He keeps an offense running smoothly, avoids disasters, distributes the ball effectively, but he also rarely lifts a team to another level when the pressure is highest. That may be exactly why many franchises are leaning toward different options: younger players, quarterbacks with room to grow, or even cheaper short-term bets on the market. For the Vikings specifically, several paths remain open. The team could continue developing J.J. McCarthy, they could sign a different veteran quarterback, or they could monitor players who might be released by other franchises in the coming weeks. When you stack all those options together, the idea of bringing Derek Carr to Minnesota starts losing momentum. Right now, looking at the league landscape, it seems less and less likely that Carr will wear purple and gold. But hold that thought for a moment. Because while the offense still raises questions, a name has appeared in the draft that could help the defense in a big way, and not many people are talking about him. While many fans are focused on the quarterback drama, an interesting story has started emerging on the defensive side of the team, and it is exactly the kind of storyline that sharp football fans love to follow, because sometimes the true impact of a draft class does not come from a first-round pick. It comes from a player who arrives quietly, no spotlight, no massive hype, just the exact type of athlete a system needs. And when you look at Brian Flores' defensive scheme, one thing becomes very clear. He loves physical players, tough competitors, athletes who can dominate the line of scrimmage and disrupt the opposing quarterback's pocket. That is where a name has started appearing as a potential perfect fit. The defensive lineman catching the attention of several analysts during the pre-draft process is Chris McClellan, a defensive tackle who played at Missouri after beginning his college career at Florida. And his profile is intriguing. McClellan stands about 6 feet 3 inches tall and weighs roughly 315 pounds. Long arms, massive hands, the type of physical build that instantly grabs the attention of National Football League scouts. When he lines up on the defensive front, you can see the raw power he brings to every snap. During his 2 seasons at Missouri, he gained more playing time and showed steady improvement. He recorded more than a dozen tackles for loss and generated pressure on quarterbacks several times. He is not the type of explosive pass rusher who will rack up sacks every week, but he does something defensive coordinators value tremendously. He collapses the pocket, and when a defensive tackle starts pushing the interior of an offensive line backward, the quarterback loses the space needed to step up and operate. That changes the entire rhythm of an opposing offense. Some scouts also highlight the strength of McClellan's hands. He can disengage from blockers with power and balance. That kind of trait is difficult to teach. A player either has it or he does not. Of course, there are areas he needs to improve. Some evaluators say he must work on his pad level because he sometimes plays too high and loses leverage. He also needs to expand his pass rush moves when attacking the quarterback. But those are exactly the kinds of details a strong coaching staff can develop. What cannot be taught is size, power, and natural explosiveness. That is why some analysts are already calling McClellan a potential hidden gem in this draft class. And here is an interesting detail. Right now, he is projected to be selected somewhere between the end of Day 2 and the beginning of Day 3 of the draft. That means a third-round pick or possibly early in the 4th round. Minnesota currently holds a selection in the 3rd round. And if this player is still available when the Vikings are on the clock, the conversation could become very serious, especially because the team's defensive line may undergo changes this offseason. Adding a young, powerful, moldable talent into Brian Flores' scheme would make a lot of sense. Now I want to hear from you. If the Vikings really have that opportunity on draft day, would you take a chance on Chris McClellan as a potential hidden gem for the defense? Tell me in the comments what you think, because the next story involves an important name already on the defense and the possibility of a trade that very few people expected to hear about this soon. Now the conversation gets a little more serious on the defensive side of the roster because a rumor surfaced that surprised a lot of fans. Nothing is confirmed yet, But when respected insiders start talking about something like this, it deserves attention. The situation revolves around an important pass rusher currently on the team, one of the players who recently arrived and helped shape the identity of the defensive scheme. But the National Football League works a certain way. Production on the field must match the financial side of the roster, and when contracts start weighing heavily on the salary cap, difficult decisions can appear quickly. The name that entered this discussion is Jonathan Greenard. Yes, the outside linebacker who became an important part of the Vikings' pass rush. According to information circulating among league reporters, Minnesota could consider a trade if the team cannot find financial space for a contract extension with him. Nothing is finalized yet, but the possibility is being discussed internally, and if that actually happens, the team would need to react quickly to keep its defensive pressure intact. Because in Brian Flores' system, the pass rush is absolutely essential. It forces quarterback mistakes. It creates turnovers. It allows the secondary to play more aggressively. Without consistent pressure, the entire defense loses its edge. That leads to another question. If Greenard were to leave, who could step into that rotational role? Several affordable names have started appearing as potential alternatives. One of them is A.J. Epinesa, who recently played for the Buffalo Bills. He is not a complete outside linebacker and he is not dominant against the run, but he offers something Minnesota values, the ability to reach the quarterback. When given a reasonable number of snaps, Epinesa tends to produce around 6 sacks per season. That is not elite production, but it could work well in a rotational role. Another interesting option is Leonard Floyd, a veteran presence with a long resume and a Super Bowl title. Floyd previously played for the Rams during the period when Kevin O'Connell was still part of that coaching staff in Los Angeles. Floyd is now in his early 30s, but he can still generate pressure from the edge. As a situational pass rusher, he could contribute effectively inside a defensive rotation. There's also a cheaper possibility. Peyton Turner, a former first-round pick by the Saints. His career never developed the way many expected, largely because of injuries. But sometimes a player simply needs the right environment to revive his career. Brian Flores has a reputation for helping players rediscover their potential. That is why his name appears in this conversation. When you look at the entire situation, it could become a domino effect. If Jonathan Greenard remains with the team, the pass rush structure stays mostly intact. But if a trade actually happens, Minnesota may need to rebuild part of that rotation quickly, and that would significantly affect the defensive planning for next season. Now keep that information in mind for a moment, because the final story in this sequence involves a defensive player few people expected to become this important, and the decision the Vikings just made about him could say a lot about the future of the defensive line. Sometimes the National Football League produces stories that almost feel impossible. A player begins his career overlooked, moves between leagues, fights for an opportunity, and then suddenly, when the right chance appears, he explodes inside the perfect system. That is exactly what happened with a defender who has become a major topic inside the Vikings organization. A recent decision from the front office shows that the team wants to keep him around, and not just as roster depth. There is real recognition that he has become an important piece of the defense. The name at the center of this story is Jalen Redmond. Some fans may remember that he did not arrive in the National Football League with much hype. He initially entered the league as an undrafted free agent with the Carolina Panthers. He was released before ever gaining meaningful playing time. After that, his career took an unusual path. Redmond joined the XFL and played for the Arlington Renegades. Many players view that kind of move as a last chance to stay in professional football. For him, it became an opportunity. That experience allowed him to regain rhythm, rebuild confidence, and prove he still had the talent to compete at a high level. When the Vikings signed him before the 2024 season, few people expected it to become a major story. During that first year in Minnesota, his role was limited. He appeared in 13 games and logged a little more than 200 defensive snaps. His numbers were modest: 1 sack, a few tackles. It looked like he was simply another rotational player trying to stay on the roster. But then came the following season, and everything changed. In the 2025 season, Redmond exploded within Brian Flores' system. His snap count jumped to nearly 800 defensive plays. With that opportunity came serious production: 62 total tackles, constant pressure inside the pocket, 6 sacks, several passes deflected at the line of scrimmage. He became a disruptive presence for opposing offenses. The interior defensive line suddenly had more energy, more strength, and more consistency. And when a player takes that kind of leap, the front office notices. That is why the Vikings decided to place an exclusive rights tender on him. This mechanism essentially prevents other teams from negotiating with the player while he is still early in his career. In other words, Minnesota maintains control of the situation. It does not guarantee a long-term contract yet, but it opens the door for an extension in the near future. There is another important factor here. The Vikings' defensive line could undergo significant changes this offseason. Some expensive veteran contracts might not remain on the roster. If those moves happen, Jalen Redmond could take on an even bigger role within the defensive front. It is fascinating to think about. A player who started as an undrafted free agent, spent time in the XFL, arrived quietly in Minnesota, and now could become a central piece of the defense. Stories like that always resonate with fans, because they show that talent sometimes appears where nobody is looking. And when you connect everything we discussed today, quarterback decisions, trade rumors, a hidden gem in the draft, and the rise of Redmond, it becomes clear that the Vikings are entering a crucial phase in building their roster. When you step back and connect all these stories happening during the same offseason, it becomes clear that the Vikings are standing at an important crossroads. There is the possibility of a veteran quarterback entering the conversation. Another name that once seemed like an option is fading from the market. At the same time, the defense could gain a hidden gem from the draft who fits perfectly inside Brian Flores' system. And there is also that delicate situation involving Jonathan Greenard that could reshape the pass rush. In the middle of all this comes confirmation that Jalen Redmond has become a legitimate piece of the defense, a player who came out of the XFL and now could assume an even larger role on the defensive line. All of this says a lot about where the team stands right now. Minnesota is trying to balance two things at the same time, competing immediately while also building the future intelligently. And when you look at the entire process, one thing becomes clear. This roster is still being shaped. Now I want to hear from you. Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this space belongs to everyone who lives and breathes Vikings football. Which of these stories has the biggest impact on the future of the team? Stay tuned. SKOL Vikings, let's go!